Now, the Russians are going to great lengths to try and recover the wreckage of the American drone that its jets downed in the Black Sea. They're diving 5,000 metres to the seafloor, and yet the Americans tell us they've wiped all of the information that the surveillance drone was carrying. Today, Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin spoke to his Russian counterpart, stressing that American drones would continue to fly in international airspace in areas where they are permitted to do so. The Joint Chiefs had this to say about Russian activity in the area.
There is a pattern of behavior recently where there is a little bit more aggressive actions being conducted by the Russians. We think we haven't completed our analysis as to why that's happening. And it wasn't just involving us. There was some incidents earlier with the British and some other nations as well.
Michael Shoebridge, an analyst with the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, joins me now. And Michael, your institute was one of those that Keating hit out at yesterday, calling it an American cell, I think. But look, looking at this issue here, what do you think is the backdrop to this? Do you think this is Russia starting to be more aggressive when it comes to US involvement in Ukraine?
Well, Sharri, the good news for Mr. Keating is I'm now with Strategic Analysis Australia, not with ASPI anymore.
Oh, you're not with ASPI. Apologies.
No, so that will no doubt please Mr. Keating. But I think the important thing about the Russian aggression against the American drone in international airspace is it shows the real anxiety the Russians have about the vulnerabilities that their militaries are displaying every day in Ukraine. And they understand the powerful role that intelligence is playing in the Ukrainians' battlefield success. So that's why they're doing what they're doing.
Look, it's really interesting that Russia chose to take this action, and it does seem to be a bit of a warning sign to the US to not get further involved supplying more weapons to Ukraine. You know, is there a point at which Putin is going to decide to walk away from the Ukrainian conflict, or is he just going to linger in there for years to come?
I think Putin's plan is to just try and stay the course, and it's not him or his sons and daughters that are being thrown into the meat grinder in Ukraine. It's a bunch of conscripts. So he'll keep doing that, conscripts and prisoners. He wants to wear out the Ukrainian military, and he's banking on the support of NATO and the US being time limited. I don't think this aggression against the US drone is really him hoping that he'll stop NATO from supporting Ukraine, but I think it shows a real anxiety about his own military's capability.
I want to ask you not about Keating again, but about the substance of what he had to say. Look, his main criticism of the submarine deal is that the nuclear subs, only 8 of them, rather than what he said you could buy 40 or 50 if they weren't nuclear powered, and that they're too bulky. He said you'd be able to see them from space. Are these legitimate concerns?
Well, it's certainly just fanciful, that line about seeing them from space. I think a problem with Mr. Keating's speech yesterday was it was abuse parading as insight. And he does seem to be trapped in the world of the 90s when he was plugged into the fire hose of information, including security and intelligence. Mr. Albanese was right. What Mr. Keating said yesterday diminishes him and is unfortunately deeply ignorant about military technology.
Well, I understand people are objecting to his abuse, of course, although, you know, it was quite entertaining to watch. But what I'm trying to get at here is, you know, he is a very smart man. He does have a big brain. Does he have a point? So you're saying that you wouldn't be able to see these from space. Is he also wrong in that they're too big for Australia's shallow waters off our coast? Is he wrong on that point?
Well, there was a former commander of UK conventionally powered, diesel-powered and also nuclear submarines who wrote about this very issue today, making the point that the advantages that nuclear submarines have all come from their unlimited power source, so they don't have to surface to recharge, and that adds a whole ability to conduct those submarine missions in ways that are far less easy to discover and track. And that advantage is certainly true in our part of the world in the Indo-Pacific.
And what about his point about the number of submarines you could buy? Because he said that if you were just buying ones that weren't nuclear powered, you could have 40 or 50 of them. He said with a third in the water or a third out at sea at any one time, you'd have about 15 in the water. If one or two were a target, would it be such a big deal? Whereas if you only have 8 submarines and there's 3 in the water at any one time and 1 is lost, that is a big deal. I guess his point is, are we getting bang for our buck here? $368 billion for 8 submarines.
Well, I think it's always true in warfare that volume is important, and defence has gone down a path of mega projects, small numbers of platforms for a lot of money. This is at the upper end of that. But Australia isn't operating these submarines just by itself. The whole intention of AUKUS is to grow that allied capacity. And the other big thing I think missing in all of this AUKUS analysis is there's a whole separate part of AUKUS which is exactly about higher volumes of lower cost systems like hypersonics, cyber systems, advanced missiles.
Yeah. All right, Michael Shoebridge, thank you very much for your insights.